The warm glow of the sun dipped low over the horizon as I stood at the front door of my new home. The sea breeze swept in, carrying the scent of saltwater and freedom. I could feel the weight of the years lifting from my shoulders with every breath I took, every wave that crashed against the rocks below. Then, the doorbell rang. I turned around, already knowing who it would be. The faces in front of me were ones I hadn't seen in over a decade. My daughter Lena and her husband Roger, they stood there like ghosts from a life I thought I had buried. Lena's face was pale, eyes flickering nervously as she fidgeted with her purse. Roger, tall and imposing, shifted on his feet, his usual confidence now cracked. Their clothes were wrinkled, their demeanor was uneasy, an obvious contrast to the serene luxury of my new home. "Mom," Lena's voice trembled as she spoke my name like she was afraid to even say it out loud. "We need to talk." After 12 years of silence, suddenly they wanted to talk. They hadn't reached out in all that time, no calls, no birthday wishes, no care at all. I had become invisible to them. I had been nothing more than a forgotten memory, a distant echo of a mother they no longer needed. Now, after I had built a life for myself, this house, this freedom, here they were, standing in front of me as if nothing had changed. I stepped aside and gestured for them to come in, trying to keep the disdain I felt from showing on my face. They hesitated for a moment before stepping over the threshold, eyes scanning the grand space as if they couldn't quite believe it. "Wow," Roger muttered under his breath. "This is impressive." Impressive, that's one way to put it. This place was everything I had worked for. The marble floors gleamed in the sunlight, the ocean view stretching out like a painting. It was everything they had never seen me achieve. And yet, here they were, walking into my life after all this time, their eyes flickering with a mix of surprise and something else I couldn't quite place. I didn't have to look closely to see what had brought them here. Their expressions, the way their eyes lingered on the opulence of my home, told me everything. They didn't want to talk because they cared. They wanted something they thought only I could give them. I closed the door behind them and led them into the living room where I gestured to the sleek leather couch. "Sit down, it's been a long time, hasn't it? 12 years to be exact." "What's so important now?" Lena's gaze dropped to the floor and Roger shifted uncomfortably. Neither of them seemed to know what to say. Their silence was more telling than any words could have been. For a moment, the room felt too quiet. The sound of the waves outside crashing against the cliffs seemed louder than their nervous breaths. I took a seat across from them, my hands folded calmly in my lap, giving them a moment to gather their thoughts. I had once believed in the importance of family. I had sacrificed so much for them, worked long hours, put my own dreams aside, and loved them with every ounce of my being. But none of that seemed to matter when they had turned their backs on me, leaving me to face the years alone, abandoned. I couldn't help but wonder as I watched them squirm if they even remembered how it felt to have a mother who would have done anything for them. Or had they forgotten the woman who had once been their world? But whatever it was they needed now, whatever excuse they had crafted in the years they had spent without me, I wasn't going to make this easy for them. Not anymore. They owed me an explanation. The air inside the house felt different, heavy, charged with the tension I hadn't realized I'd been holding onto all these years. It was as if the space itself was waiting for them to speak, waiting for me to respond, but neither of us seemed quite ready for that conversation. Lena shifted on the couch, her hands clasped tightly together in her lap, fingers trembling. She hadn't looked me in the eye yet, and that told me more than any apology could. Roger, on the other hand, was scanning the room like it was his first time seeing anything like it. It was obvious they hadn't come here for a reunion. They weren't here to rebuild anything. They were here because they needed something. Something I wasn't sure I was willing to give. It felt like déjà vu standing there in front of them. I had spent so many years of my life trying to understand why they'd left me behind. For years, I had replayed the moments in my mind, those phone calls that never came, the invitations that were always lost, the holidays where I cooked for one while they built lives without me. I had been left behind like a book left to gather dust on a shelf. "Mom," Lena's voice broke the silence. She finally looked up, but her eyes were filled with guilt and something more fear. Fear that I wouldn't let them in, fear that I wouldn't forgive them. But why should I? 12 years had passed and I had learned to survive without them. "We know it's been a long time, but..." Lena's voice trailed off as Roger cleared his throat, his gaze flicking toward the ocean outside the window, avoiding mine. But we're going through a tough time, Roger finally added, his tone laced with a sense of urgency that felt far too practiced. We need help, Annabelle. We didn't know who else to turn to. I watched them closely. It was a confession, but not a real one. It was just the first of many half-truths they would spill. This wasn't a cry for help from a daughter who had missed her mother. It was a plea from two people who had nowhere else to go. They had used up all their other options and had decided at last to come to me. After all these years of silence, after all the birthdays and holidays they hadn't even acknowledged, they wanted something. And now, with their backs against the wall, they thought I would just open the door again and let them in. I felt the old bitterness rise in my chest like a wave crashing against a rock. I had spent my days working for my survival, selling pies, baking desserts to make ends meet while they enjoyed their lives. I had endured loneliness in the midst of my love for them, but I didn't need them. Not anymore. And what exactly do you need from me, Lena? What do you expect me to do now? I asked, my voice low, even, but the question stung. The silence between us stretched, thick with unspoken truths. Lena blinked, clearly struggling with the words, but it was Roger who spoke again, taking the reins, trying to steer this conversation back toward something they could control. We've lost everything, he said, his voice tight. Our house is in foreclosure. We're living with my parents now and it's not working. We need money, Annabelle. It's the only way to get back on our feet. We need help from you. I leaned back in my chair, taking in their words. The desperation in Roger's voice. The way Lena glanced up at me, hoping for a sympathetic reaction, a lifeline. It was all too familiar. It was the same manipulation that had been there before, the subtle guilt they had planted in my heart over the years, hoping I would give in. I could see right through it now. It wasn't love that brought them here. It wasn't regret either. It was the cold, calculated reality that they had no one else left to turn to, and they thought they could charm me into helping them. But I wasn't their pawn anymore. They had chosen to leave me behind. They had chosen to erase me from their lives when I was at my lowest, and now that they were struggling, they expected me to pick up the pieces. Help, I repeated, almost laughing bitterly at the irony. After all these years, you think I can just give you everything you need because you're in trouble now? You think I'm supposed to forget all that time you spent ignoring me, pretending I didn't exist? Lena looked away, her eyes glossy with unshed tears, but I couldn't feel sorry for her. She had made her choice, and the reality of it hit me harder than I was prepared for. Do you even know what that feels like? I asked quietly. To wake up every day wondering if your own daughter remembers you. To see your grandchildren grow up in photos you can't touch, and to have people tell you it's just life when they cut you out. The silence was thick now, almost suffocating. Lena wiped her eyes, but it didn't matter. The damage had been done, and I had to wonder, if they had been so easily able to erase me from their lives once, how could I trust them now? I didn't need them. I had built my life from scratch, piece by piece. And I wasn't about to let them tear it apart for their convenience. Not anymore. Let me ask you something, I said slowly, my voice firm. If I had come to you 12 years ago when I was struggling, when I had nothing but my pride and my pie recipes, would you have helped me? Would you have cared? Lena's face crumpled, and for a brief moment I saw a flicker of remorse in her eyes, but it was too late. The room felt colder now, the weight of my question hanging in the air. They didn't have an answer, and deep down I knew that. They had abandoned me when I needed them most, and now that their world was crumbling, they expected me to save them. Lena's eyes darted around the room, unable to meet mine. Roger shifted uncomfortably, his posture stiff, like he was still trying to gauge what would happen next. He cleared his throat, trying to regain some control of the situation, but I wasn't having it. You didn't think of me back then, I continued, my voice steady but cutting through the tension like a knife. Not when I was working 2 jobs, baking pies, and praying for the next paycheck to come in. Not when I was sitting at home, wondering where the hell you were. Not when the phone stayed silent and the invitations never came. Lena's face twisted with emotion, and I saw her struggling, trying to find the right words, but nothing came. Roger, however, was still in problem-solving mode, his brow furrowed as he formulated his next move. He could tell I wasn't going to cave this time. Annabelle, we've made mistakes, he said, his voice lower now, as if trying to calm the situation. We know we hurt you, we've been through a lot too, we just didn't know how to ask for help, And now you want me to fix it, I interrupted, not giving him the chance to finish. Now that you've gone through all your other options, you come to me expecting me to drop everything and come to your rescue. Lena's hands wrung together, the ring on her finger catching the light as she twisted it nervously. Mom, we're just asking for a little help, please. It's for the kids, too. They're asking about you. They want to know where their grandmother is. We've been trying to keep it together, but we need you. The words stung more than I expected, but it wasn't the children who hurt me. It was the fact that after all these years, they still saw me as someone they could manipulate. They weren't asking for a mother or even a grandmother. They were asking for a solution to their problem, and I had become the solution. The kids? I repeated, my voice almost a whisper. What do you mean, the kids? You've had children, Lena. Grandchildren, my grandchildren, and I don't even know them. Not one birthday, not one Christmas. All the years they've grown up, and I've been nothing to them but a stranger. Lena's tears fell freely now, but they didn't move me. She had shed them before when she was young, when she still wanted me to be part of her life. This was different. These tears felt like a calculated move, another piece of the emotional puzzle they were trying to fit together. Mom, please, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't mean for it to be like this. We didn't know how to deal with everything. Gregory and we just got lost in it all. I stood up slowly, my back straight and my hands clenched. It took everything in me not to yell at them, to not tell them exactly what I felt, what I had gone through. But I couldn't. I had learned that the more I said, the more they would twist my words into something they could use. This time, I wasn't going to give them that power. Do you know what I went through? I asked, my voice low but firm. Do you know how many times I cried myself to sleep wondering if I'd ever see my daughter again? Or how many holidays I spent alone, cooking meals that no one would ever eat, setting the table for a family that didn't exist? Do you know what it was like to wait by the phone, hoping for just one call? Just one? Lena's sobs grew louder, but they felt empty. I had no more sympathy left. My heart had been broken too many times, and I had rebuilt it over the years. This time, there was nothing left to break. You think because you're struggling now, because things are falling apart for you, that I'm supposed to come running? I continued, my words like ice. You think I'm going to put everything aside, my peace, my life, everything I've worked so hard for, and fix your problems? No, Lena, that's not how this works. I paused, watching as the realization dawned on both of them. The years they had spent pretending they didn't need me had led them to this moment, the moment when they finally saw me, not as their mother, not as someone who loved them unconditionally, but as a safety net to fall back on when everything went wrong. Now you need me, I said quietly. But what about when I needed you? Where were you then? When I was alone, struggling to make ends meet, where was your love then? Roger finally stood up, his frustration bubbling over. You don't get it, Annabelle. We're asking for your help. We're not trying to make you feel guilty, but you can't just help. I cut him off sharply. You don't get it. You don't get to show up after 12 years of silence and expect me to drop everything. You don't get to walk in here like you're entitled to something from me. I built my life without you, and I'm not going to tear it apart to help you fix yours. Lena looked at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. Mom, please, we're family. We're supposed to help each other. Family, I repeated with a bitter laugh. Family doesn't leave you behind for years, then show up when things get hard. Family doesn't erase you from their lives like you're nothing. You don't get to claim family now, Lena. You lost that privilege. The silence that followed was deafening. It was the kind of silence that made everything feel final, like we had reached the end of something that had been broken for far too long. Lena's face crumbled as she looked at me, the pain in her eyes raw and real, but even that wasn't enough to make me forgive. Even the remorse, the tears, the desperation, they all felt hollow. This was the reality of what they had done. And it wasn't something I could fix with a simple act of kindness. I wasn't the same woman they had left behind, and they weren't the same people who had once been my family. The room was thick with tension now, and I could hear the faint hum of the ocean waves outside, almost mocking the quiet that had descended between us. The sun was sinking lower, casting golden light across the room, but all I could focus on was the sharp sting of betrayal. It felt like a heavy weight on my chest, the kind you can't shake no matter how hard you try. Lena stood up, wiping at her eyes, her voice trembling when she spoke again. Mom, we know we messed up. We're not asking for you to forget everything. We just what? I interrupted. What exactly do you want from me, Lena? What is it that you think I owe you now? After all these years of silence, Roger opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand, silencing him. This wasn't about him anymore. He had made his position clear the moment he walked through the door, and there was nothing he could say to make me change my mind. The damage had already been done. Lena took a step closer, her eyes searching mine, almost pleading. We didn't want this to happen. We thought we were doing the right thing. Gregory said that we needed to focus on our family, that too much involvement with you would cause problems. I felt a bitter laugh bubble up inside me, but I swallowed it down. The nerve of Gregory to manipulate Lena into cutting me off, into choosing him over her own mother. It was a betrayal so deep that it still stung, even now as she stood there trying to explain the choices she had made under his influence. You thought you were doing the right thing, I repeated, my voice thick with disbelief. You thought cutting me out of your life was the right thing. You thought that pretending I didn't exist would solve your problems. Lena's face flushed, and for the first time she seemed to understand the weight of what she had done. But it was too late for understanding, too late for apologies that felt like they were coming only because the world had flipped upside down for them. It's not about you anymore, Lena, I said softly. It's about me. I spent 12 years trying to figure out how I let you do this to me. I thought it was something I did wrong. Maybe I was too much, too present, too eager to love you. Maybe I asked too much. But after all this time, I realize it wasn't me. It was you. You chose to forget about me. You chose to abandon me when I needed you most. Lena opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her tears were silent now, and I could see how deeply they pained her, but the sting of that hurt was not mine to carry anymore. Roger, who had been silent for too long, finally spoke. Annabelle, you have to understand, we were trying to build something. No, I cut him off, my voice sharp now. You were trying to build something at my expense. You tried to build your family, your perfect little life, and you thought that meant you had to erase me from it. You never thought about what it would do to me, to us. But now you come asking for help, for forgiveness. You can't just expect that from me, not after everything. The reality of it all settled over me like a heavy fog. I had spent so many nights crying, wondering where I had gone wrong. I had blamed myself, thinking I wasn't enough, thinking I had somehow failed them. But I wasn't the one who had failed. They had failed me. And it wasn't something I could just sweep under the rug. Lena stepped forward again, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't want to hurt you, Mom. I never meant to. I love you. I've always loved you. The words felt empty now, like they had been said too many times before. And in this moment, I realized that love wasn't enough. Love wasn't enough when it was only ever spoken in moments of crisis, when it was only shown because things had gone wrong. Love wasn't enough when it had been withheld for so long, when it had been treated like a commodity that could be pulled out when convenient. And now you love me, I asked, my voice trembling despite myself. Now that you need me. Now that things have fallen apart, you love me? You don't get to love me now, Lena, not when it's too late, not when you only remember me because you have nowhere else to turn. Roger moved to speak again, but I raised my hand, stopping him in his tracks. I don't need to hear your excuses, Roger. I'm done with the apologies, the lies, and the manipulation. I'm done letting you control how I feel. The room fell silent again, the weight of the truth settling in. It was almost too much to bear, but I felt a strange peace in that silence. It was a peace I hadn't felt in years. For so long I had been afraid of losing them, afraid of being abandoned. But now I wasn't afraid anymore. I've built a life for myself, Lena, I said quietly, my voice steady, and I've done it without you. I've learned to survive, to find joy and peace without you, and I'm not going to let you or anyone else take that from me now. Lena's sobs grew louder, but this time I didn't flinch. I had cried enough for both of us. I had given too much of myself, and now it was time to stop, time to take back what was mine. Roger stood there, his face hardening as he tried to process what was happening, but there was no turning back. They had shown me who they really were, and I wasn't going to keep chasing after them, hoping for something they would never give me. I've made my peace, I said, standing up and walking toward the window, my back to them now. And you will have to make yours. I don't owe you anything, Lena, not anymore. The door to my new life was closing, and I wasn't going to let them open it again, not for them, not for anyone. And as I stood there looking out at the vast ocean, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. The silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. I could feel their eyes on my back, but I didn't turn around. I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. I wasn't going to let them see how much their visit had rattled me. I had spent so many years wishing for this moment, the moment when they would realize the damage they'd done, when they would come crawling back, begging for forgiveness. But now that it was here, I realized something. I didn't need them to come back. Not anymore, not when they only came because it was convenient for them. I took a deep breath, feeling the salty air fill my lungs. There was something about standing by the window, looking out at the endless expanse of the ocean that made everything feel so small, so insignificant. Lena's sobs continued, soft and desperate. Roger, as always, remained the silent observer, the man who never quite understood what it meant to lose something so precious. I could feel him itching to speak, to fix things, to manipulate the situation back into his control. But this time, there was no room for that. This time, I was in charge of my own life, and I wasn't going to let them drag me back into their mess. "I can't believe this," Lena's voice cracked from behind me. "I've lost you, Mom. I've lost everything." The words should have stung, but they didn't. Instead, they felt like an old wound reopening, one that had healed years ago. "No, Lena," I said without turning around. "You didn't lose me. You let me go. You made that choice." "But I didn't mean it," she pleaded. "I didn't mean to push you away. I was just trying to make things work with Roger, to make him happy." "Happy?" I interrupted sharply. "You thought abandoning your own mother would make him happy? You thought cutting me out of your life would make your marriage work? What kind of logic is that, Lena?" There was a long pause. I could feel the weight of her guilt pressing down on her, but I didn't feel sorry for her, not anymore. "You've spent all these years blaming me for not being there when you needed me, but you never stopped to think about how it felt for me to be left behind," I said, my voice growing colder. "You chose him over me, over your own mother, and now you want me to just forget all of that because things are hard for you." Lena was silent. I didn't need to hear her apologies anymore. I knew they were just words. They always were, and then the door slammed. I didn't have to look to know that Roger had stormed out. His pride was too fragile, and he couldn't stand being confronted with the reality of what he'd done. Lena's sobs quieted, but I could hear her footsteps as she walked toward me. She stood beside me, her hands shaking as she reached out for me. "Please, Mom," she whispered. "Please don't shut me out. I know I've messed up, but I'm still your daughter. I need you." I turned to face her then, and for the first time in years, I truly saw her. I saw the woman she had become, the one who had chosen convenience over love, the one who had let someone else dictate her life. But what hurt the most wasn't that she had chosen him over me, it was that she had never truly fought for me, not once. "I don't need your regret, Lena," I said quietly. "What I need is for you to learn to stand on your own, to make decisions for yourself, and to stop letting other people tear your life apart." She shook her head, her tears streaming down her face. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to make it right." "You can't fix it," I told her, my voice firm. "Some things can't be fixed. The past is the past, and no amount of apologies or tears is going to change that." Lena took a step back as if my words had physically pushed her away. I watched her, feeling the emptiness in my chest that I hadn't allowed myself to feel in so long. It wasn't a sadness. It wasn't a pain. It was simply the realization that I had done everything I could for her, and now I had to let go. "I have to go," she whispered, her voice barely audible as she turned toward the door. I'll give you space." I didn't stop her. I didn't even try to say anything else. As the door closed behind her, I felt the quiet settle back into my home, into my heart. I was alone, but for the first time in so many years, it didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like peace. I sat back down in the armchair by the window, watching as the last slivers of sunlight dipped below the horizon. The sky was painted in hues of purple and orange, and the ocean stretched out before me like an endless promise. I had built this life for myself, and it was mine. No one could take that from me, not Lena, not Roger, no one. And as I sat there, I realized that I had finally come to a place where I didn't need anyone's approval, anyone's love, anyone's validation. I had learned to love myself enough to let go of the people who hadn't loved me back. For the first time in years, I felt free, and that was enough. The evening drifted on, quiet and steady. The sky outside my window darkened, the stars coming to life in the vastness above me. The sound of the waves crashing against the shore seemed to mirror the silence inside my home. I had always imagined that if I ever found myself alone in this big house by the ocean, I would be lonely. I thought I'd long for the company I once had, my daughter, my family. but tonight something inside me shifted. The solitude felt different. It felt like a gift. I had spent too many years hoping for their love, their approval, their understanding. For 12 years I had lived in the quiet agony of being left behind. But now, standing here in my new life, I realized that I didn't need them to fill the space in my heart anymore. I was whole on my own. I picked up my phone, staring at it for a moment. The message from Lena was still there, sitting unanswered. Part of me wondered if I should respond, if I should open the door back up just a crack. Maybe things could be different now, but another part of me knew better. I had given them everything once and they had chosen to walk away. My fingers hovered over the keys, but I couldn't bring myself to write back. Not yet, not until she understood what I had learned the hard way. Love isn't something you can take for granted. It isn't something you can expect to receive only when you need it. I set the phone down on the table and stood up, walking over to the kitchen. The familiar scent of vanilla and cinnamon from the evening's baking still lingered in the air. The memories of the countless hours spent kneading dough, filling pies, and watching the sun rise over my small kitchen flooded back. It had been my therapy, my routine, my way of surviving when nothing else made sense. Now, in this beautiful house, I had everything I needed. It wasn't about the fancy furniture or the ocean view, though those things were nice. It was about the life I had built for myself, without them, without anyone telling me what to do, what to feel, what to give. I poured myself a glass of wine and walked out onto the terrace, taking a long sip as I gazed out at the darkened water. The world felt still, and for the first time in years, I felt at peace with it. I wasn't waiting for their apology anymore. I wasn't waiting for them to understand. I had learned to be content with the life I had created. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and that was enough. The sound of the doorbell echoed through the house, snapping me out of my thoughts. I looked toward the front door, a small wave of irritation creeping up my spine. Of course, they'd come back. They always did, didn't they, when they needed something? But this time I wasn't sure I could handle it. I had given them my heart once and they had shattered it. Still, I felt a strange pull in my chest. Maybe it wasn't just about me anymore. Maybe it was about what I had learned in the years without them. Maybe I could give them one last chance to see the woman I had become, the woman I had fought so hard to be. I took a deep breath and walked inside, my steps slow and deliberate. As I reached for the door, I felt my heart pounding, not with fear or anger, but with something else. Something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time: hope. Maybe, just maybe, this time things could be different. I opened the door and there they were again. Lena, standing there with her head lowered, and Roger beside her, his expression more resigned than I'd ever seen it. "Mom, we just wanted to talk," Lena said softly, her voice almost pleading. For a moment I stood there, taking them in. The silence between us felt like a wall, but this time I wasn't the one who was going to break it. "You're back," I said, my voice steady, "but I'm not sure I have anything left to give." Lena's eyes filled with tears again, but this time I didn't feel the familiar tug of sympathy. I didn't feel the need to fix things for them. I had learned my lesson. "We're not here for anything," Roger said quietly. "We just wanted you to know that we regret everything. We were wrong." I nodded slowly, my heart heavier than it had been in years. "It's too late for regrets, Roger. I've been through too much to just let it all go now. The truth is, I don't need to fix this. I've already moved on. I've learned to live without you." Lena's voice wavered as she stepped forward. "Please, Mom, we just want a chance to make things right. Can you please just listen to us?" I stared at her, the same girl I had raised, the girl who had once looked at me with eyes full of love and trust. But now, she was a woman, one who had made choices I couldn't undo. "I listened to you for years," I said, my voice breaking just slightly. "I listened to every excuse, every promise that never came true. I waited, and I waited. But I can't wait anymore. I can't keep giving pieces of myself to people who only want me when it's convenient." They stood there, unsure of what to say, but I knew there was nothing more to say. They had made their choices, and now I had to make mine. "You need to go," I said quietly, the finality in my words sinking in. "I've learned to live without you, and that's something you need to come to terms with." Lena's face crumbled, her tears falling freely. Roger's gaze shifted uncomfortably, but he didn't protest. They had come seeking something from me, but it wasn't something I could give them anymore. With a final glance at them, I closed the door gently. The sound of the lock clicking into place felt like freedom. I turned back toward the kitchen, my heart a little lighter, knowing that the choices I had made were my own, and they were enough. I didn't need anyone else to validate that. I poured myself another glass of wine and stepped out onto the terrace again, the ocean stretching out before me, endless and full of possibility. This was my life now, and it was enough. The next few days passed in a haze of quiet reflection. The house felt even bigger now, the empty spaces more pronounced, but there was no sorrow to be found in the silence. It was as though everything that had once been heavy, the years of pain, the hopes dashed by betrayal, had slowly faded into the background, leaving only the soothing hum of the ocean and the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat. I had been alone for a long time, but somehow now it didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like freedom. I spent my mornings in the kitchen as I always had. The familiar sounds of chopping, stirring, and baking were like a balm for my soul. There was something almost sacred about these simple routines. They grounded me. They reminded me of who I was before all the drama, before the lies and the abandonment, before I had allowed their absence to define me. The aroma of freshly baked pies wafted through the house, a constant reminder of the strength I had built from scratch, one recipe at a time. Every pie crust I rolled, every filling I prepared felt like a small act of defiance. I wasn't the woman who waited by the phone anymore. I wasn't the mother who baked for a family that never came. I had built something for myself, and no one could take that from me. By noon, I would load up my basket with the day's baked goods and head to the market. Sundays had become my ritual, the one time each week when I could see familiar faces, trade stories, and bask in the simple pleasures of human connection. The older women I'd come to know over the months had become my new family. Their laughter, their advice, their shared understanding, it was enough. They understood what it was like to be cast aside by those they loved, and they had learned to rebuild their lives just like I had. Martha was always there, waiting for me by my booth, her kind eyes crinkling into a smile as she approached. "How's the ocean, Annabelle?" she asked one Sunday, her voice low and comforting. "Still treating you well?" I nodded as I handed her a fresh batch of apple pies. "It's quieter than I thought, but the peace feels good, really good." Martha chuckled, taking a deep breath of the salty air. "It's funny, isn't it? How you spend so many years thinking you need someone else to feel whole, only to realize that you've always had everything you needed inside of you. You just had to let go to see it." Her words resonated deep within me like a soft bell tolling in the distance. How had I never seen it before? All these years I had clung to the idea that family was everything. But family wasn't just about blood, it was about respect, love, and mutual understanding. It was about being there for each other, not when it was convenient, but when it really mattered. I had learned the hard way that I could survive without them, and I was stronger for it. As the weeks passed, I noticed something I hadn't expected. The void that had once felt so deep, so consuming, began to shrink. At first, I had thought it would always be there, that I would always carry the ache of being abandoned by my own flesh and blood. But it wasn't like that. The ache wasn't gone, but it had softened, like a scar that healed into something worn and familiar but no longer sharp. It was during one of those quiet afternoons when I was packing up my things to leave the market that I saw her. Lena, she was standing at the edge of the square, her eyes scanning the crowd. When she saw me, her face lit up, and before I could turn away, she was walking toward me, her steps hesitant but determined. "Mom," she said, her voice small, fragile, as if it might break with the weight of all the years between us. "Can we talk?" I paused for a moment, the rhythm of my heartbeat steady but slow, like the tide coming in. I could see the tears in her eyes, but there was something different about them now. They weren't the tears of someone trying to manipulate me, trying to get something from me. These were the tears of someone who had finally come to understand the magnitude of what they had lost. For a moment, I said nothing. I simply stood there, taking in the woman before me. She wasn't the little girl who once called me her hero, the girl I had spent sleepless nights worrying over. But she was still my daughter, and despite everything, I couldn't help but feel the pull of that bond. It was deep, woven into the very fabric of who I was. Finally, I nodded. "Come on," I said softly. "We can talk." We walked slowly to a nearby bench, the sounds of the market fading into the background as we sat down. Lena looked at me, her hands fidgeting in her lap, her gaze uncertain. But there was a new vulnerability in her eyes that hadn't been there before. A quiet understanding, like she was finally seeing me for who I was, not just as her mother, but as a person in my own right. "I know I don't deserve this," she started, her voice shaky, "but I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I realized that I've been selfish, that I've taken you for granted for so long." I didn't say anything. I just let her words hang in the air, giving her the space to speak without interruption. "I was wrong, Mom," Lena continued, the tears finally spilling over. "I was so focused on what I thought I needed, what I thought would make my life better, that I completely ignored everything you were going through. I ignored you, and I hate myself for that." I reached out, placing a hand on hers. It was the first time in years I had felt this kind of closeness with her. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what I had hoped for all those years, but it was a start. "I'm not asking for you to forgive me, not right away," Lena whispered, "but I want to make things right. I want to try." I took a deep breath, the weight of everything we had been through settling on my chest. But there was something else there too, something lighter, something that told me maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild, not from where we left off, but from where we were now. "I don't know if we can fix everything, Lena," I said quietly, "but I can listen, and I can try." She nodded, her face softening with a mixture of relief and regret. "That's all I need right now, Mom. Just a chance to show you that I can be better." And for the first time in so many years, I felt a flicker of hope stir inside me. Maybe it wouldn't be the happy ending I had once imagined, but it could be something real. Something different. For the first time, I wasn't just hoping they would change. I was hoping that we could both learn to move forward, not as the people we once were, but as the people we had become. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. We sat in silence for a while longer, letting the moment breathe, the weight of the years between us slowly, quietly lifting. The days that followed felt different, lighter somehow. It wasn't that everything was fixed or even that everything had changed. It was that the heaviness of the past, the weight of the silence that had stretched between me and Lena for so long, had been lifted, if only a little. There was still a long road ahead of us, but for the first time in 12 years, there was hope. We began talking more, small conversations at first, nothing heavy. She came by the house to visit a few times, bringing her kids, my grandchildren. They were shy at first, staring at me with wide eyes like they weren't sure who I was or if they were allowed to like me. I remember the first time they came over, I had baked a batch of cookies, a simple recipe I had perfected over the years. Lena hesitated at the door, her fingers nervously tapping the edge of the basket she held. The kids, a boy named Marcus and a girl named Sophie, hung back behind her, looking at me with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Mom," Lena started, but I held up my hand, cutting her off gently. "Let them come to me," I said, offering a smile I didn't quite feel but knew I needed to give. Sophie was the first to step forward. She was a little thing, maybe 5, with dark hair that bounced as she walked. Her eyes, a mirror image of Lena's, studied me as she approached the plate of cookies I had set on the table. "They smell good," she said quietly, a soft giggle escaping her lips as she reached for one. "Can I have one?" I nodded, my heart swelling with emotion, but I didn't show it. I just nodded and smiled, my hands still folded neatly in my lap. Sophie picked up the cookie and took a bite, her face lighting up with delight. "This is the best cookie ever," she announced with all the sincerity a 5-year-old could muster. Her words were simple, but they hit me like a wave. I hadn't expected her to be so open, so unafraid of me when her own mother had been so distant for so long. But the innocence of a child, the way they can love without hesitation, without fear of the past, there was something healing in that. Marcus, a little older, still hung back, clutching Lena's hand. He looked at me, then back at his sister, clearly unsure of the situation. "You're my grandma?" he asked, his voice cautious, like he was testing the waters. I nodded again, trying not to let the emotions take over. "Yes, I am." His eyes widened, and for a moment I saw something flicker there, recognition, curiosity. It was a fleeting moment, but it felt like a small victory. "You're the one who made the cookies?" he asked, his tone softening a little. I chuckled, feeling a warmth spread through me. "I did. You're welcome to have one too, if you'd like." Slowly, hesitantly, Marcus stepped forward, taking a cookie from the plate. He bit into it, his face lighting up the way Sophie's had just moments earlier. "This is really good," he admitted, giving me a shy smile. I had never thought that something as simple as baking cookies would have such a profound impact, but in that moment I realized it was more than just the cookies. It was the act of being there, of opening my door, my heart to them despite everything that had happened. We sat and talked for a while longer, and the conversation flowed in a way it hadn't in years. Lena was quieter now, but she didn't seem as guarded. She wasn't trying to fix everything with words. She was just present, and that was enough for me. As they left later that afternoon, Lena turned to me with a soft smile, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in a long time. "Thanks, Mom," she said, her voice sincere, "for everything." I simply nodded, my chest tight, but in a way that felt good, like a knot that had been slowly unraveling over the past few months. There was so much still left unsaid between us, so much still left to heal. But for the first time in years, I felt like we were finally moving forward. That evening, as I sat by the window watching the sky turn shades of pink and purple, I reflected on the day. I had been so afraid of letting go of the past, of losing the family I thought I needed. But now I realized that I didn't need to hold onto everything that had hurt me. I didn't need to carry the weight of their absence any longer. I had learned to fill my own heart. I had learned to survive without them, but now I could let them back in slowly, carefully, in the way that was best for both of us. The next morning, I woke up early, just as the sun was beginning to rise over the water. I made my coffee as I always did and sat by the window, feeling the first rays of sunlight warm my skin. There was something peaceful about this time of day, about the stillness before the world started to stir. The phone buzzed on the table beside me, pulling me from my thoughts. I picked it up, already knowing who it was before I even looked at the screen. It was a message from Lena. "I don't expect everything to be okay right away, but I'm here. I want to keep trying, Mom. I love you." The words were simple, but they felt like a lifeline. I stared at the message for a long time, feeling the weight of the years, the mistakes, and the hurt that still lingered. But there was something new now. Something that hadn't been there before, hope. I typed a reply, my fingers moving slowly across the screen. "I love you too, Lena. Let's keep trying." As I sent the message, I felt something shift inside of me, a quiet affirmation that we had a long way to go, but this was the beginning. The beginning of something new, something real. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. The next few weeks brought with them small, subtle changes. Lena and I didn't rush anything. We took things slow, rebuilt our relationship piece by piece, like a delicate puzzle we were both learning to piece together. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic confessions, just quiet moments where we were both learning how to be in each other's lives again. I began to see my grandchildren more often. Sophie and Marcus, who had once been strangers to me, were becoming familiar faces, their laughter ringing through the house, reminding me that love wasn't a thing of the past. It was still here, still possible. With time, we were forging new memories, ones that were rooted in the present, not the mistakes of the past. Lena still came by to visit. There were moments when she would stay a little longer than planned, when we would sit in the kitchen together, talking over a cup of tea. Sometimes we'd even bake together, laughing at the mess we'd make and the cookies that always seemed to turn out just right. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was all I could ask for. One afternoon, as I was finishing a batch of pies for the market, Lena came in with a smile that reached her eyes. She was holding something behind her back, her excitement barely contained. "I've got something for you," she said, grinning from ear to ear. I looked at her curiously, wondering what she could possibly have. She pulled out a small framed picture, the edges worn and faded. "It's from the old days," Lena said softly. "I thought you'd want it." I took the frame from her hands, recognizing the photo immediately. It was a picture of me holding Lena as a baby, her little hand wrapped tightly around my finger. We were both smiling, the light of our lives shining bright in that moment before anything had changed. Tears welled up in my eyes as I looked at it. The memories flooded back, the years of love and laughter, the moments when we were everything to each other. And in that instant, I realized that despite everything that had happened, despite the hurt, we were here now. We had found each other again. I turned to Lena, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, I've missed this. I've missed us." And for the first time in a long time, Lena hugged me, no hesitation, no guilt, just the simple comfort of a daughter's love. We stood there for a while, the silence between us no longer uncomfortable but filled with understanding. I knew we still had a long road ahead of us, but I also knew that the journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. The next Sunday, when I stood at my booth at the market, I had a new sense of peace. My life wasn't perfect and there were still wounds to heal, but it was mine. I had built it with my own two hands and I had found a way to move forward no matter what life threw my way. As the market crowd bustled around me, I couldn't help but smile. I was surrounded by familiar faces, by the women who had become my second family, by the customers who appreciated the simple joy of a homemade pie. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like something was missing. I felt whole. This chapter of my life wasn't defined by the mistakes of others, by the hurt of the past, or by the absence of the people I had once held dear. It was defined by the strength I had found in myself, by the love I had reclaimed, and by the lessons I had learned the hard way. And just like the waves rolling in on the shore, I knew that I would keep moving forward no matter what. If you enjoyed this story of resilience and rediscovery, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. And remember, no matter how many times life tries to knock you down, you always have the power to rise again. Keep moving forward, keep finding your peace. You are stronger than you know.